I'm Yumi Standlee, and today I will be presenting a preliminary investigation of verbal morphology in Bario Kelabit, using archived data from 1971. So, what is Bario Kelabit? Bario Kelabit is a little described language from the Austronesian island of Borneo. Kelabit is spoken by about 6,000 people, and Bario Kelabit is one of several dialects of Kelabit. This research was done because I wanted to use archived data to analyze and describe a little documented language. Bario Kelabit was one language available to analyze in a field methods class by Dr. Peter Schulke. Using the data available to me, I wanted to test how far one could get into analysis with just archival records of a language. The data was collected from Dr. Robert Blust's field notebook entry on Bario Kelabit. This notebook entry was written in 1971. The data was archived on Kaipuleo-Hone Digital Archives held by the University of Hawaii. I was given access through Dr. Schulke's class. The data was entered into a Flex Fieldwork software file, and the lexicon that I created included 546 word entries. I also included 229 sentences with their word glosses and free translations. I also did further analysis on the verbal morphology of these sentences. That being said, let us turn to the verbal morphology that was analyzed. One of the morphological processes that had the most evidence toward it was homoorganic nasal substitution. As you can see from this chart, there was something occurring with nasal substitution in the verbal morphology. In intransitive verbs, the nasalization turned the intransitive verb into a transitive verb, and it even turned some nouns and adjectives into verbs. This makes it clear that the nasal substitution is doing something to increase the valency of a word. Nasal substitution has several phonetic environments in which the type of nasal changes. As you can see by this list of alternations, when a word began with a stop such as D or P or B, these stops would be replaced by a nasal in the same place of articulation. For example, an alveolar stop such as D was replaced by an alveolar nasal such as N. On the other hand, when an initial sound was a vowel or a liquid, then the eng nasal was attached before it. In the case of vowels, it would just be the eng affixed before the word, but if it was a liquid, the eng would have a schwa inserted in order to break up consonant clusters. Consonant clusters seem to not be allowed in this language. The underlined form is likely the nasal substitution of stops, and then the nasal adapts to words with initial vowels and liquids. There was also some evidence of reciprocal action in the morphology. As you can see, the P schwa or reduplications of that pattern could indicate that two people were making each other do something. So it was something like a causative, but for reciprocal action. This observation is supported by Twan and Dr. Alexander Smith's analysis that the reciprocal action is P schwa. This is indicated in their manuscript of a Kelabit dictionary that is yet to be published. There is also evidence for an emphatic reflexive. In this language, it has to do with the distributive in which the actor is emphasized. For example, instead of just saying in the first sentence, he is listening, the emphatic reflexive changes the structure to he is the one who is listening. He himself would be another way you could say it. There was also evidence of an instrumental nominative, which also has a form P schwa or a reduplication of that pattern, much like the reciprocal action prefix seen earlier. But these appearances of the prefix do not indicate that the verb is done by two different people to each other. Instead, this prefix nominalizes the verb and turns it into something used to complete the action. For example, nabat to tie would turn into pangnabat or pungnabat, meaning something used to tie. Now, there were several squibs or linguistic mysteries that were not able to be solved with just the data set from the field notebooks. Two of them had to do with infixes. The first one with the in or variants of that has different examples of passive, past, and present progressive in the current data set. It might be that there are several morphemes that just appear to be the same morpheme. In addition, the infix schwa m seems to not only verbalize nouns and adjectives, but also make the verb causative, passive, or past tense. Again, this may be a sign that there are several morphemes that just appear similar but have different functions and contexts. Additionally, morpheme ordering rules are unclear in this dataset since the archive focused on analyzing one morpheme at a time. In future research, we could investigate infixes as well as morpheme ordering rules. In conclusion, Bario Kelabit has a productive morphology that enables inflection and derivation of verbs. Archival data was invaluable to this study, and it demonstrates that meaningful analysis can be done years after the information was initially gathered. As a reminder, this data was gathered in 1971, and 50 years later, meaningful analysis was able to be completed. Further studies can focus on fieldwork that ensures reliable archiving, allowing greater access to Kelabit and encouraging continued studies even when direct access to speakers becomes challenging or impossible. Here are my works cited. Thank you for listening.